The SEAL commander's smirk said everything you needed to know. Another desk jockey playing at being an operator. But when the ambush turned his elite squad into sitting ducks and their $1 million training couldn't save them, Seren Drake did something that made every man on that ridge rethink everything they thought they understood about combat. She produced a rifle they had no idea she carried, stepped alone into a kill zone, and drove 5 rounds through 5 targets in 3 seconds flat. The commander's words came out like a rasp through clenched teeth as he watched her. No woman fires like that. He'd been right. Not because it was impossible, but because Seren Drake wasn't the kind of woman they expected. What followed forced America's deadliest warriors to face an ugly truth they'd preferred to ignore. The most dangerous person in the room is often the one everyone overlooked. The C-130 bucked through turbulence above the Karak Range near Kandahar province, its cargo bay full of men who could sleep through almost anything. Everyone except Seren Drake. She sat utterly still on the canvas seat, eyes open, tracking the shadow play as the plane pitched and rolled. 28, compact, dark hair pulled into a regulation bun that cut her face into hard lines. She wore the same desert fatigues as the others, the same armor, the same professional bored look. Yet her gray eyes, like low winter clouds, followed every movement in the bay as if filing threats no one else could see. Opposite her, Chief Logan Cross caught her eye and looked away first, something that had happened increasingly since she joined their lift. The SEALs had no idea what to make of the woman sent from the Joint Special Operations Directorate, a presence on their mission like a barnacle on a hull. Her file read, Intelligence Analyst. Her bearing said something else. 30 minutes to drop, the loadmaster called over the engine noise, and the SEALs went through their ritual. Weapons checks done with the easy efficiency made by repetition. Seren hardly moved, only her hands running through kit with calm, methodical motions. Sidearm, mags, medkit, comms, everything in the place she wanted it. Everything reachable without thinking. Lieutenant CMDR Derek Harlan threaded down the cargo bay. Fingers on the overhead straps as the aircraft pitched. The picture-perfect SEAL officer. Tall, broad, square jaw, that steady confidence of a man who'd never lost what mattered. He halted in front of her with a look that was neither warm nor openly hostile. Drake, he said, voice raised to fight the engines. Let's set expectations. This is a direct action raid. You remain with the command element. You observe. You take notes. You do not engage unless the team is being overrun, and you literally have no choice. Clear? Seren met him with those storm-gray eyes. Crystal, sir. I mean it. You have a dozen shooters who've trained together for months. We don't need intelligence section heroics. Harlan paused, waiting for protest or excuses. When none came and she returned his stare with absolute calm, he grunted and moved on. Behind her, she heard Petty Officer Mason Hayes whisper to his buddy, Bet $20 she freezes when the first shot pops. No bet, came the reply. They always do. Seren logged those voices, the rhythms, the assumptions. Intelligence work taught her civilians and soldiers both reveal more in idle talk than in briefings, and right now those men confirmed exactly what she expected. They saw liability, paperwork wrapped in camouflage. The loadmaster ran the final approach checklist. Seren closed her eyes and performed a private ritual no one in the bay would understand. Not prayer, not hope, not visualization, but a clinical acceptance of what she was about to walk into. Emotion, she'd learned, was baggage you could not afford. The ramp dropped, and the dawn air rushed in, dry, cold, tasting of dust and diesel. The SEALs flowed out with practiced speed, boots biting packed earth as they advanced in the formation honed by drill, until it became instinct. Seren followed in the command element, close enough to see, far enough back not to get in the way of the actual operators. Except she had never been merely an observer, and by day's end everyone would be forced to accept that. The compound lay in the valley like an old wound, ringed by terraced hills farmed for generations. Pre-dawn light washed the scene in gray and purple, turning mud brick walls into a sepia-toned photograph. Intel said the target, a high-value Taliban commander, was inside with a security detail. Intel said 6 to 8 fighters, light weapons, not sophisticated. Intel, Seren knew bitterly, tended to be optimistic. The SEALs moved through the approach with textbook precision. Seren rode with Harlan at the radio operator's station, watching the assault element close on the compound. She tracked Chief Logan Cross as he moved point, scanning for IEDs, checking corners with a steady, practiced rifle hand. These were consummate professionals, the best the country put in the field, and something felt wrong. Seren felt it before she could name it. That crawling prick between the shoulder blades that veterans learn to trust. The compound was too quiet. No barking dogs, no roosters, no morning life stirring, a pressure of silence that read like the word wait. "Sir," she said under her breath to Harlan, "something's off." He shot her an irritated look. "They're asleep. We're ahead of Revi. That's the plan. No dogs." Rural Karak range. No dogs. Maybe they'd been eaten, someone muttered. "Drake, I need you to..." Harlan began, but a concussion cut him off. The first explosion shattered dawn like breaking glass. A massive IED buried along the approach route, timed to go off after the assault passed, but while the support element still stood in the kill zone. Seren felt the blast wrench her chest as flame and smoke poured from the hillside. Men went down screaming, radios flooded with frantic calls for corpsmen, sit reps, someone to explain what had just happened. Then the gunfire opened. Not from inside the compound, but from prepared positions on the hills, fortified and sighted by someone who knew exactly how American special ops raids worked. Muzzle flashes bloomed like hateful stars as automatic fire swept the valley floor. The ambush was textbook and brutal. The SEALs had walked into a trap built for them. Now they were pinned in a kill zone with wounded men and nowhere to hide. Harlan barked into his radio, trying to marshal a response, trying to pull scattered elements back together. Seren watched with clinical calm as rounds kicked dust around them. She counted muzzle flashes, judged distances, and mapped where the enemy commander likely sat by which positions fired in coordinated bursts. Her hand drifted to her sidearm and froze. Not yet. Not unless absolutely required. A SEAL collapsed 10 meters left of her, clutching a leg where a round had found an armor gap. Another dragged him toward a low wall, while bullets zipped past like swarms of angry hornets. Where was the firebase supposed to be for Overwatch? "Outpost Delta is under attack," the radio operator reported, voice taut. "Heavy contact." They couldn't support. Of course they couldn't. This wasn't an opportunistic hit. It was a coordinated strike on multiple points, engineered to isolate and annihilate an American special ops element. And it was working. Seren keyed her radio and spoke on the command frequency with a calm that cut close to eerie. "Heathen 6, this is Cypher 7. Request immediate air support coordinates. Multiple fighting positions dug in. Estimate 30 to 40 combatants. Prepared defenses." "Cypher 7, Heathen 6. Be advised, air assets 20 minutes out." "Can you hold?" came the measured reply. 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. "Negative, Heathen 6, we need it now." "Working, Cypher 7, stand by." Standing by was not an option. Another SEAL went down and didn't rise. The corpsman who tried to reach him took fire and was forced back into cover. Seren could now pick out the enemy commander, or at least where she believed he was, by which position controlled the other's fire. Halfway up the hillside, a fortified position with perfect fields of fire aimed into the valley held the advantage and was hardened against counter-battery responses. Chief Cross staggered back to the command element, breathing hard, a cut above his eye bleeding into the dust. "Sir, we're getting torn apart. We need to move. Find cover. Something." "There is no cover," Harlan snapped. "It's all kill zone. They planned this perfectly." "Then we die here," Mason Hayes snarled, his earlier swagger gone, replaced by the sharp edge of fear. And then Seren stood up. She simply rose, calm as someone standing from a church pew. Every SEAL stared at her like she had lost her mind. Standing in a firefight is how you get hit. Everyone knew that. Everyone except Seren Drake, who was already sliding toward a low berm that offered barely enough cover and a clean line on the shooters. "Drake, get down!" Harlan roared, but she ignored him. Her hand slipped to the small of her back beneath her vest and drew a weapon that was definitely not standard analyst issue. A compact black rifle, customized for a very particular kind of work. A suppressor for quiet kills. Optics worth more than a car. She dropped the bipod in one smooth motion and went prone behind the berm, cheek to stock, breathing steady as if she'd done this 1,000 times. Through the glass, the hillside came alive. Muzzle flashes, movement behind rock, the shimmer of overheated barrels. "What the hell?" Cross murmured. Her first shot was almost silent, a soft, suppressed crack lost in the chaos. On the ridge, a PKM gunner jerked backward, his weapon falling still. The others didn't even realize what had happened before Seren shifted to her next target. Another crack, another man down, the one calling the ambush from behind stone cover. He thought he was safe. He was wrong. She worked the field like a machine. Every shot deliberate, final, clinical. She wasn't suppressing. She was erasing, one target at a time. This was the kind of marksmanship that looked effortless, but took years of drilling, perfect math on ballistics, and a nerve colder than most people could imagine. The SEALs watched, stunned, as their quiet analyst became something else entirely. Her rounds found bodies at ranges that shouldn't have been possible for that rifle. Wind, elevation, heat shimmer. She adjusted for all of it with motions so subtle they looked like instinct. A two-man RPG team prepared to fire on the pinned Americans. Seren dropped the gunner with one round at 400 meters, then took the loader before he touched the weapon. Both hit the dirt within 2 seconds. The rocket clattered away unused. "Jesus Christ," Hayes whispered. "Who is she?" Harlan, watching through his own scope, saw enemy positions collapse under fire from someone who wasn't supposed to have a weapon, much less use it like that. "Drake, what the hell are you?" She didn't answer. Her world had narrowed to breath and trigger, the tiny rhythm of precision. The enemy commander she'd singled out tried to relocate, slipping between terraces, thinking the terrain hid him. It didn't. It was a difficult shot. Moving, half obscured, distance that made most shooters miss paper. Seren led him just enough, squeezed, and watched the figure drop mid-stride. Instantly, the hillside's fire broke apart. No coordination, no discipline, just men panicking for their lives. Survival replaced tactics. Retreat replaced courage. She fired 3 more times, each round catching someone who thought they'd escaped. There was no safe retreat, not from her. They're breaking, Cross said, disbelief thick in his voice. She's breaking them alone. And just like that, the battle ended. Not with drama, but with silence. One by one, the guns went quiet, leaving only smoke, blood, and the echo of what Seren Drake had done. The valley fell into an almost oppressive hush, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of burning kit. Serene secured her rifle and rose, expression blank. No triumph, no relief, no shakes from adrenaline. Just a steady posture, weapon at the ready, scanning for threats that were no longer there. Harlan closed the distance slowly, like someone approaching a dangerous animal he wasn't sure was tame. Drake. His voice had changed. No sneer now, no contempt. Something like awe tangled with caution. What the was that? She met him with those gray eyes. That was me keeping your team alive, sir. An intelligence analyst doesn't shoot like that. Nobody shoots like that. So what are you, really? Seren ejected the magazine, checked the chamber, then reloaded with movements that spoke of thousands of repetitions. The person they send when intelligence isn't enough, she said, meeting his stare. The person they send when they need someone who can read a situation and fix it. She paused, level and deliberate. They send me when they need targets eliminated, and nobody can ever know who did the eliminating. Silence fell heavy with meaning. Chief Logan Cross cut it with practical urgency. We've got wounded who need immediate evac, and we have to police this area before someone higher up decides to rain mortars down on us. Harlan still stared at Seren. How many did you get? 17 confirmed. Maybe 3 more I'm not certain on. 17. He tested the number like it was a new thing to hold. In how many minutes? Does it matter? She answered. Yes, it matters. Because I've done this 12 years and I've never seen anyone shoot like that. He let the question hang. The question I'm asking is whether you're an asset or a threat. Serene slung the rifle across her chest. Right now, Commander, I'm the reason your men are going home alive. That's what should matter. She walked off toward the corpsman working over the wounded, leaving Harlan standing with thoughts he probably wouldn't fully process. Behind him, Mason Hayes and his buddy murmured, "Did you see that?" "I saw it. Don't believe it, but I saw it. Who the hell is she?" "Someone way above our pay grade, brother. Way above." The sun climbed, burning off the morning chill and exposing every gritty detail of the fight. Spent brass, blood, torn kit. Amid it all, Seren Drake moved through the wounded with practical efficiency, helping the corpsman stabilize men for extraction. She didn't look like a clinical killer who had just removed 17 enemy fighters with surgical precision. She looked like what her file said, an intelligence analyst doing her job. But everyone who had watched the valley now knew something truer. Files lie, appearances deceive, and the most dangerous people are the ones you never see coming. A Chinook's rotors hammered the air as it touched down in a swirl of dust. The wounded were loaded first, litters and assisted walkers moving aboard. The rest of the element followed with the careful, mechanical efficiency of men who had just survived the unexpected. Seren was the last to board, pausing at the landing zone's edge with weapons slung, eyes sweeping the ridgelines one last time for lingering threats or revenge seekers, because that's what you do when you're the person responsible for killing 17 men before breakfast. As she reached the ramp, Harlan closed and took her arm, not a wrenching grab, but firm enough to halt her. "We need to talk when we get back. Full debrief. I'll file a written report." "I don't want a report," Harlan said, his voice low but sharp. "I want to know who you really work for, and what the hell you were doing on my operation." Seren. eased her arm free, careful and controlled. I work for the same country you do, Commander. I was doing my job. That's all you need to know. Bullshit, he snapped. That's also all you're going to know, sir. She put weight on the title, not mocking, but close enough to sting. Now let's get these wounded to medical before we have this talk again. The flight back to base lasted 40 long minutes. Seren sat apart near the crew chief's station, quietly stripping and cleaning her rifle while the SEALs huddled together, processing what they'd just survived. Some dressed wounds. Others stared blankly into space, lost in the replay. A few stole glances her way, trying to reconcile the calm woman polishing her weapon with the one who'd just shattered an ambush single-handedly. Chief Cross eventually left his team and dropped beside her, saying nothing for a while, just watching her hands work. Oilcloth across the bolt, bore snake through the barrel, each motion clean and economical. My daughter wants to enlist, he said at last. Marine Corps. I've been trying to talk her out of it, telling her it's no place for women, that she'll never get real respect. Serene didn't look up. You should stop. Stop what? Lying to your daughter, she said softly, because that's what you're doing. You're telling her she can't when you should be helping her prepare for the fact that she absolutely can. He went quiet. How long have you been doing this? The real job, not the analyst thing. 8 years. He hesitated. How many? She finished for him. How many have I killed? Enough that I stopped counting. Not so many that I've stopped remembering. She looked forward as she spoke. Every face, every shot. You carry them, that's the price. But you're so young. Old enough, she said, finally meeting his eyes. If your daughter wants to serve, help her, train her. Don't lie and say she can't just because it's hard. She paused, voice low but steady. Some women can do this job better than most men. We just have to work twice as hard for half the credit, but we can do it. Cross exhaled slowly. That shooting, what I saw today, that wasn't training. No, she said. That's what happens when you give someone the right aptitude. Endless rounds, endless hours, and instructors who only care about perfection. She reassembled the rifle with sure, quick hands. That's what happens when you stop treating war as a man's domain and start seeing it as a professional craft anyone can master. The helicopter banked, the base spreading below. Tents, vehicles, perfect rows of order that made the morning's chaos even harder to stomach. Someone had known exactly where they'd be, exactly how they'd move. Someone had built the perfect trap, and now someone would want to know how. Serene Drake had torn it apart. The landing was pure chaos. Medics rushing, officers shouting for reports, the base commander already demanding debriefs. Seren used the confusion to slip away toward the intel section, rifle broken down and locked in its case. She'd written reports before. She knew the script. She was 50 meters out when a voice stopped her cold. Captain Drake. Not Seren, not Drake. Captain. She turned. A man in civilian clothes stood beside a black SUV that didn't belong on any forward base. 50s, still fit, the kind of man who'd once done field work and hadn't softened much since. Eyes sharp and knowing. Agent Davenport, she said evenly. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. She fell in beside him as they moved toward a stack of shipping containers arranged for privacy. When they were alone, Cole Davenport turned to face her. Then I had 16 separate intelligence feeds, saying this was a clean kill, target in place, minimal security, textbook raid, and it turned into the kind of cluster that gets congressional hearings. Agent Cole Davenport said, eyes hard as flint. The intelligence was compromised, no doubt. The question is how and by whom, but that's not why I'm here. He studied her like a man measuring risk. I'm here because you violated your cover, he continued. You were supposed to observe, take notes, provide real-time intel, not conduct direct action that shows 17 enemy KIA attributed to one shooter. He tapped a tablet for evidence. Seren stayed still. Would you prefer those 17 were Americans? She asked. I'd prefer you follow orders, he replied. Your job was to maintain cover as an analyst while gathering intel on SEAL tactics. That's why we inserted you. That's what you were supposed to do. My job is to keep Americans alive, he said, voice tight. Your job is what I tell you it is. His tone hardened. You're not a SEAL. You're not a Ranger. You're not even officially military anymore. You're an asset, a tool we use when conventional options fail, and tools that act independently tend to get locked away. Are you threatening me? She asked coolly. I'm reminding you there are consequences for going off script, he said flatly. The operation you observed is compromised. Every man on that team knows there's something unusual about you. They'll talk. They'll speculate. Eventually, someone will ask questions that lead to answers we don't want. Seren shifted her weight, a tiny gesture most would miss. Davenport noticed. He'd been trained to notice. He took half a step back, suddenly aware. He was speaking to someone who'd killed 17 men before lunch and didn't seem bothered. So what happens now? She asked. You write your report, he said. You explain the enemy positions were degraded by preparatory fires, that you provided real-time intel enabling effective engagement. You explain everything, except that you personally removed half the enemy force. You want me to lie? She said. I want you to maintain operational security, he replied. There's a difference. She considered that. She'd known this talk was coming the moment she'd picked up her rifle. Every operation carries consequences. Every choice has a price. And if I refuse? She asked. You'll get reassigned to a desk in a basement in Virginia, analyzing satellite photos of empty desert. He laid out the alternative. Is that what you want? To be shelved while others do the real work? He had her. Both understood it. Seren Drake was many things, but she could not sit quietly behind a desk while Americans died. That was her weakness, and Davenport knew how to use it. I'll write the report, she said at last. Good, he nodded. And Drake, next time you're inserted, remember why you're there. Observation, analysis, support, not heroics. He turned and walked away, leaving. Seren. Alone among the shipping containers, the shadow of consequence folding quietly around her. Above her, the Condora. Sun burned with pitiless heat. In the distance, the base kept its rhythm. Rotors thumping, engines growling, the constant pulse of a war still in motion. Serene looked at her hands, steady, no tremor, no trace of what she'd done. But inside, she was running silent calculations. Loyalty versus duty, orders versus conscience. The thin line between being a weapon and being a person. And somewhere in that stillness, she made a decision that would define everything that came next. 3 days later, Seren Drake sat in a gray briefing room with Ala T, CMDR, Derek Harlan, Chief Logan Cross, and 2 officers from the Joint Special Operations Directorate. The concrete walls were bare, no windows, just the kind of room where truth gets edited and consequences are quietly filed away. Harlan Chutilmung opened the meeting. The official report says the enemy positions were already softened by airstrikes before our arrival. That Captain Drake provided valuable real-time intel that enabled effective targeting. That the operation, despite casualties, was a success. He paused, eyes locked on hers. But we all know that's bullshit. We all know what really happened. So I'll ask one more time, Captain. Who do you actually work for? She had spent those 3 days deciding how to answer. She'd written the report Davenport wanted, filed the paperwork, protected her cover. But sitting here, facing men who'd nearly died because of bad intel, she chose differently. I work for an organization that doesn't officially exist, she said evenly. We identify operations where conventional responses aren't possible or aren't allowed. We send in assets like me to resolve them through direct action while keeping the U.S. government's hands clean. Assassins, one of the JSOD officers said flatly. Problem solvers, she corrected. Our targets are always verified threats to American lives or interests. But sometimes those threats sit behind political shields, diplomatic immunity, or in countries where we're not supposed to be. When that happens, we go in. Crossati leaned forward. So what are you? A ghost? One of those myths the teams whisper about? I'm someone trained for one job, Seren said. To keep Americans alive when every rule says it's impossible. Harlan's expression shifted, disbelief to anger, then something closer to respect. The Valley ambush, he said. It was perfect. Someone in the Afghan forces tipped them off. They knew our route, our timing. It should have been a massacre. It was supposed to be, she said quietly. Instead, it became a reminder about underestimating the wrong person. You saved our lives, Harlan said. I did my job. No, he said, shaking his head. You went far beyond that. You risked your cover, your mission, everything to save a bunch of SEALs who spent the whole flight treating you like you didn't belong. Why? Serensikstukum was silent for a beat, then spoke softly. Because that's what we do. We keep Americans alive even when they don't know we exist, even when they'd hate the way we do it. We live in the shadows so you can work in the light. That's the deal. That's the burden we carry. That's the burden we carry. The room stayed silent until one of the JSOD officers finally spoke. This conversation never happened. This briefing never occurred. On paper, Captain Drake provided intelligence support. Nothing more, nothing less. Everyone nodded. Good. Because if word leaked that we run assets outside the normal chain of command, conducting lethal operations under American authority, but without official oversight, there'd be investigations, congressional hearings, criminal exposure, and everyone in this room would be dragged into that net. They filed out one by one. Harlan lingered until it was just him and Seren. For what it's worth, I was wrong about you. Completely wrong, he admitted. Is it lonely? Being that person nobody's supposed to know about? Seren thought about that sometimes, he said, and then added what he always came back to. The SEALs who went home because she'd been there. The attacks that never happened, because someone like her had been in the right place at the right time. That's why she kept doing it. Will I see you again? He asked. Probably not, she said. People like me don't stick around. We move, we adapt, We disappear. That's how we stay effective. She gathered her minimal gear. Harlan has watched her slip away, the woman who'd saved his team and then vanished into legend before his eyes. Drake, one last thing. She paused at the door. Thank you for my men, for keeping them alive. You're welcome, Commander. Do me a favor. What's that? Stop underestimating people based on faces or files. The most dangerous people are always the ones you never see coming. Remember that, and maybe you'll live long enough to make Admiral. She walked out, leaving Harlan alone in the quiet briefing room. 6 months later, in another country on a different operation, Seren Drake sat in an observation post watching a target house through high-power optics. The mission: identify, confirm, eliminate. The kind of work that never makes headlines, earns medals, or appears in any official record. Her spotter, a young operator on his second tour, whispered nervously, "You really just sit here, wait for the shot, take it, and disappear? Doesn't it bother you, killing people from a distance without them even knowing?" Serene shifted her scope a fraction to account for a wind shift the spotter hadn't seen. "It used to," she said softly. "Then I stopped thinking of it as killing and started thinking of it as solving problems. That man in that house," she continued, "is planning an attack that would kill hundreds, maybe thousands. He's protected by his government, security detail, and international law. Conventional options are exhausted, so I'm here. And tomorrow," she said, "hundreds of people who don't even know I exist will wake up alive because of what I do tonight. That's how I live with it." The target appeared in a window. Her finger eased to the trigger. "Stand by." "Standing by," the spotter breathed. The shot was perfect. Clean, final. The target dropped. Serene was already breaking down her weapon, preparing to disappear into the night. Another problem solved. Another threat removed. Another day being the person nobody was supposed to know about, doing work no one would publicly acknowledge. The wolf doesn't announce itself to the flock. America's deadliest wolves wore faces nobody would remember, held jobs no one would admit existed, and carried burdens no one could understand. Seren Drake was one of those wolves, and the world was safer because of it, even though the world would never know her name. Thank you for watching.